The cold morning air hit Riley Carter as she stepped out of the airport and pulled her coat tighter. It had been a long flight home from Amsterdam. Her latest assignment as a tech consultant had gone spectacularly well. As she slid her suitcase into the back of the rideshare van, her thoughts drifted to her car waiting for her back home in Maple Creek, a sleek navy blue sedan she'd bought with the bonus from her first big promotion. It wasn't just a car, it was independence, pride, and the only place she kept her father's old army dog tags. She had left it safely parked in her mother's driveway 2 weeks ago. But as the van rounded the familiar bend leading to the small cul-de-sac where she'd grown up, Riley's stomach dropped. The car wasn't there. What the hell, she murmured, stepping out quickly and looking around the driveway like maybe she had missed something. The space was empty. She dragged her suitcase inside, her pulse already picking up speed. "Mom?" She called into the house, her voice sharp with panic. "Morning, Riley," said Frank, her stepfather, emerging from the living room in sweatpants and slippers, a coffee cup in one hand and a folded newspaper in the other. Riley stared at him. "Where's my car?" Frank didn't flinch. "We had to let it go," he said with a shrug, not even meeting her eyes. "The house needed repairs. We all make sacrifices, right?" Riley's mouth fell open, but no words came out. "You sold my car?" she finally managed, her voice thin with disbelief. "Don't be dramatic," Frank scoffed, walking toward the kitchen. "It wasn't being used. You've been overseas for almost 2 weeks. Roof's been leaking into the pantry. Your mother and I decided." "You decided?" Riley said, following him into the kitchen like someone following the trail of a car crash. Her mother, Marianne, was hunched over the sink, scrubbing a pan with more aggression than necessary. She didn't look up. "Mom?" Riley asked, her voice quieter. "You knew?" Marianne sighed. "Frank handles our finances, honey. You know that. I'm 34 years old. That was my car. You had no right." Riley's voice cracked, and Frank gave her a smug look over his shoulder. "Look, some guy named Trent bought it. Gave us $6,000. Good deal, considering the mileage. He even took some of your tech stuff, sounded like a good deal." Riley's knees felt like they might give out. "My laptop was in that car. My backup drive. Dad's dog tags. All my digitized work files." "Relax," Frank interrupted. "Your junk is in a bin in the garage. We kept the important stuff." Riley stormed out to the garage and found a single plastic tub filled with tangled charging cords, old receipts, and a ripped tote bag. Her laptop and drive were missing. Her dad's tags were gone. "I swear to God," she muttered under her breath. Frank's voice carried from the kitchen doorway. "Trent gave us another $400 for those electronics. Said it'd help with materials for the plumbing job." That's when something snapped. This wasn't just about a car. Or a laptop. It was about control. Frank had never liked her independence, the fact that she worked internationally, that she made more money than he ever had. Her mom had married him 3 years ago after meeting him through a local handyman job. Riley had been skeptical but gave him a chance. After all, her mom deserved happiness after her father passed from cancer. But Frank had slowly inserted himself into every aspect of her mother's life, always under the guise of helping. He started small, fixing things around the house, giving unsolicited advice about her mom's retirement accounts, and eventually, nudging her out of her own decisions entirely. Riley didn't miss the subtle digs he made at dinner. "Oh, globetrotting again, huh? Must be nice not having to pay real bills. Or, if you'd stayed local, maybe you wouldn't be so scatterbrained." It had started as irritation. Now, Riley saw it for what it was, control masked as casual indifference. She returned to the kitchen, eyes burning. "Frank, I want Trent's full name and contact number. Now." He looked up from the classifieds. "What for?" "Deal's done. You sold my property without permission. That's theft." Frank smirked. "You've been living here for free for almost a year. Maybe you should be thanking us." "I moved in to help with the foreclosure when you lost your HVAC job," Riley snapped. "I've been paying your overdue bills. Don't rewrite history just because you're embarrassed." Marianne finally turned around, her face pale. "Please don't fight," she said quietly. "I can't take this today." "Then tell him to give me the number." Frank slammed his mug down. "You think you're the only one with responsibilities? I've got a renovation lined up that's going to set us right. Just needed startup funds." Riley's eyes narrowed. "Is this the same project you've been talking about since February?" His jaw tightened. "I'm not stupid, Frank. If you sold my car to cover another gambling debt or to float some imaginary construction job, I will take legal action. Frank tried to laugh it off, but it sounded thin. You always were dramatic. Riley didn't say another word. She walked upstairs, locked her door behind her, and sat on the edge of the bed trying to calm the rage storming through her. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Riley sat at her desk late that night, the glow from her tablet screen the only light in the room. Her fingers hovered over the screen as she reviewed her bank's mobile app. She scrolled through transactions, her eyes sharp, dissecting every line. The deposit from the sale of her car, $6,000, Frank had said, was nowhere to be seen. Not in her mother's account. Not in the household account she'd been managing to help them stay afloat. Her mind buzzed with possibilities, none of them good. She tapped through to the shared utility account, where she and her mother had combined funds for paying bills. Still nothing. The next morning, Riley left early for work at her downtown office, her thoughts preoccupied. Her company had recently transitioned to a hybrid model, and being back at her desk gave her access to secure tools she didn't have at home. She logged into the internal network and opened a private session. Riley wasn't just a consultant, she specialized in fraud detection systems for financial institutions. She'd helped design monitoring protocols for unusual withdrawals, asset transfers, and shell account movement. She knew how to follow money. And now she was following Frank. During her lunch break, she called her mother's credit union, where Marianne kept her retirement account. Riley had set up alerts months ago, with her mother's permission. That's how she spotted it, a $5,000 cash withdrawal from the previous day. She froze. Frank had said the roof repairs would cost around $1,500. So where was the rest? A terrible, familiar suspicion started to form in her gut, a theory that had only been a whisper before. It wasn't just that Frank had sold her car. It was that he was using the money for something hidden, something darker. Back at home that evening, Riley confronted her mother gently, over cups of chamomile tea in the den. "Mom," she said softly, "did you approve a $5,000 cash withdrawal yesterday?" Marianne blinked, setting her cup down slowly. "What? No. Why?" Riley watched her mother's face change as realization dawned. "Frank told me it was a bank fee. I didn't even think to double-check." Riley clenched her jaw. "That wasn't a fee. It was a full cash withdrawal. From your retirement fund." Marianne's hands trembled. "He said he needed a deposit for the roofing contractor." Riley leaned forward. "Mom. There is no contractor. No one's been to the house. I checked with the only two roofers in town, neither has heard from Frank." Marianne looked like she'd been struck. "Oh God." "Mom," Riley said gently, "has Frank ever borrowed large sums from you? Money that disappeared? Told you about opportunities that never panned out?" Tears welled up in Marianne's eyes. "He always said he just needed a little to tide us over. That he had something big in the works." I wanted to believe him. Riley placed her hand over her mother's. "I think he has a gambling problem. Or worse. He's hiding something, and he's using your assets to fund it." Marianne looked away, ashamed. "He gets angry when I ask questions. Tells me I'm interfering, that I don't trust him. That's because he's trying to control you. But he's not going to get away with it." Later that night, Riley dug through the filing cabinet where her mother kept financial documents. To her horror, entire folders were missing. Bank statements, old investment records, even documents relating to the house. "Mom, did you move these?" she asked. "No. I haven't touched that cabinet in weeks." Riley's thoughts raced. She had stored hard copies of several of their accounts there as backup. Frank must have taken them. But why? In the bottom drawer, buried under old receipts, Riley found something odd, a small, black flip phone. She powered it on. It had no password. There were several text messages in a thread labeled Vince, filled with threats, demands for money, and references to missed payments. "Your time's up. Don't make me come looking for you again. If I don't get the 10 grand by Friday, I start collecting collateral." Riley read through the messages in stunned silence. Vince wasn't a friend. He was a loan shark. A very real one. Now it all made sense. Frank hadn't sold her car to fix the roof. He'd sold it to pay off gambling debts. And worse, he had likely stolen from Marianne to stay afloat, betting that he could replace it before anyone noticed. She copied the messages, took pictures of the phone's contents, and created a folder on an encrypted USB stick she kept for emergencies. Riley knew what came next. The following day, she and her mother met with a lawyer downtown. A family attorney named Lena Wu, recommended by Riley's colleague, who specialized in elder protection and financial abuse. Lena reviewed the phone photos, bank statements, and Riley's notes with a solemn expression. "I see this more than I'd like," she said. "Financial exploitation, especially of widowed women, is sadly common." Marianne looked devastated. "I didn't see it. I should have." "This isn't your fault," Lena assured her. "Frank is good at what he does. Predators like him are skilled at masking their intentions behind charm and familiarity." Together, they filed the first wave of protection. Marianne revoked Frank's access to her retirement and checking accounts. Riley helped open a new one in a different bank with two-factor authentication and biometric access only. They documented the evidence for future legal action and prepared an emergency plan in case Frank returned home angry. That night, Riley received an alert from their new account system, an attempted login using a disabled account number. Frank had tried to access Marianne's account and failed. Riley stared at the notification for a long moment. She knew what was coming. Frank wouldn't take this lying down. But now, they were ready for him. When she told her mother, Marianne reached over and squeezed her hand. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know," Riley said. "But we're not alone anymore." They were building a case. They were reclaiming their lives. 3 days passed without a word from Frank. The silence wasn't comforting, it was loaded with tension. Riley and her mother tiptoed through their own home, checking locks twice and leaving the porch light on all night. Every time a car passed, Marianne peeked through the curtains. On the fourth evening, Riley came home from work and found her mother sitting rigid on the couch, clutching a crumpled envelope. "He called," Marianne said quietly. Riley felt the air in the room shift. "He said he's on his way home. Wants to clear the air." He sounded like himself again. Calm. Polite. Even apologized. "That's his game," Riley muttered. "He always reappears right when you're about to regain control." She took the envelope and opened it. Inside was a cashier's check for $4,800, Frank's idea of a peace offering. "Where did he get this?" she asked. "He said a client owed him for some side consulting." Riley stared at the shaky handwriting, the bank name partially smudged as if by design. She didn't buy it for a second. "We stick to the plan," she said. "He thinks you're still vulnerable. Let him believe that." That night, Riley called Lena Wu, the lawyer, and informed her that Frank was on his way home. Lena was ready. She had already connected with a contact at the sheriff's office. "If he comes back and tries anything, even as small as accessing mail or shared property, we can act," Lena said. "But we need a witness, or better, an officer." Riley had someone better. Her cousin, Elijah, was a detective in the city's financial crimes unit. She'd avoided calling in favors, but this was the moment. Elijah came by the next morning, dressed in plain clothes, and installed a discreet camera in the front hallway. Then, he handed Riley a small voice recorder disguised as a pen. "Just get him talking," he said. "Don't confront him too hard. Let him say enough to hang himself." Later that evening, as the last rays of sun dipped below the horizon, Riley and her mother heard the sound of gravel crunching outside. The headlights of an old Buick swept across the living room wall. Frank had arrived. He walked in with a box of chocolates in one hand and a bouquet of daisies in the other, Marianne's favorite, Riley noted bitterly. He wore a brown leather jacket and that same infuriating grin she'd seen him use on everyone from dinner guests to debt collectors. "Ladies," he said warmly, as if nothing had happened. "Let's talk, yeah?" He kissed Marianne on the cheek, and to Riley's dismay, her mother didn't pull away immediately. Frank turned to Riley with a forced smile and held out the check. "For your car," he said. "I know it doesn't cover everything, but it's a start." Riley took it and examined it without a word. "Where's it from?" she asked. "Private client," he said easily. "Guy from Tacoma. Property investor. Name?" Frank paused. "Does it matter?" "Only if we're pretending this came from legitimate work," Riley said, her voice cold. Frank laughed nervously and turned to Marianne. "See? She's always been suspicious of me. Can you blame me?" Riley said. "You've drained accounts, sold my car, and taken cash from Mom's retirement. Not to mention the threats from that Vince guy." Frank's face hardened at the mention of Vince. "You've been going through my things? You left your burner phone in the filing cabinet," Riley said. "And you took Mom's documents. We know everything." Frank's smile vanished. Those were mine to manage. I was taking care of this family. By stealing from it? Riley shot back. He moved a step closer, voice low. You don't understand how this works. You think you're smart with your little apps and spreadsheets, but you've got no idea how tough it's been keeping this place afloat. Riley didn't flinch. You kept this place afloat by gambling with someone else's money. You didn't just take Mom's savings. You opened credit cards in her name. You sold her jewelry, Dad's wedding band included. Marianne gasped, her composure breaking. Is that true? Frank turned to her, face pale. Honey. It was just temporary. I had to leverage some assets. Leverage? Marianne repeated, her voice rising. You call pawning my memories leveraging? Riley pulled the voice recorder from her pocket and clicked it off. That's enough, she said. Frank stared at it, realization dawning. I knew you'd try something like this, he said bitterly. Setting me up? No, Frank, Riley said, stepping aside. You did that all by yourself. At that moment, the front door opened. Elijah stepped inside with a uniformed officer beside him. Mr. Bennett, Elijah said calmly, we need you to come with us. Frank's eyes went wide. On what grounds? Financial fraud. Identity theft. And based on what we've recorded tonight, conspiracy to exploit a dependent adult. Frank's bravado cracked. You can't prove any of that. We already have, Elijah replied. And we're not the only ones. 2 other women you dated under false pretenses have come forward. They have similar stories. Same gambling buddy. Same empty promises. Frank turned to Marianne, his voice suddenly desperate. Kathy, you're not really doing this. After everything I've done for you. What you've done, Marianne said, standing now, is rob me. Not just of money, but of years of peace. Of dignity. Of trust. You're making a mistake, he spat. No, she said, her voice steady. I'm finally correcting one. As they led Frank away, Riley exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. The house was quiet again. Still in need of repairs. Still full of painful memories. But now, it felt like hers again. 2 days after Frank was escorted out of the house in handcuffs, Riley and her mother found a strange kind of stillness settling over their home. It wasn't quite peace, it was the kind of hush that lingers just before a storm. Frank had been released on bail. Elijah warned them over the phone. His bail was paid by someone named Vincent Cole. Same guy from the burner phone. We're keeping an eye on him, but just in case, stay alert. Riley's stomach turned. Vincent. She had suspected he was more than a business associate. Now she knew. This wasn't just a personal crisis, it was tied to something deeper, darker, and far more dangerous. That evening, their neighbor, Mrs. Holloway, called. There's a moving truck at your house, she whispered over the phone. Men are loading up what looks like furniture. I thought you were staying home? Riley's heart slammed into her chest. We are. Thank you, Mrs. Holloway. She called Elijah immediately, who dispatched a unit to the house. By the time Riley and Marianne arrived with Elijah and 2 officers in tow, the truck was gone. The house was quiet, but ransacked. The lock on the back door had been pried open. Inside, drawers had been emptied, closets thrown open. Electronics were gone. Their television, laptop, even the stand mixer from the kitchen had vanished. But more importantly, so had the filing cabinet. Every legal document they had printed. Every statement. Every physical trace of what Frank had done. Gone. He's not just trying to steal things, Riley said, staring at the empty space where the filing cabinet used to be. He's trying to erase the case against him. Elijah nodded grimly. He knows it's falling apart. That we're closing in. He's panicking. But now we've lost everything, Marianne whispered, sinking into the couch. Not everything, Elijah said. We still have your lawyer's copies, the voice recording, the burner phone. But yes, this complicates things. Especially if he managed to destroy documents before we can build a full case. Riley's mind raced. There has to be something else. That night, she sat awake in her childhood bedroom, flipping through the mental checklist of everything Frank could have taken, bank files, credit card statements, even the warranty on the water heater. Then she remembered something her father used to say. Keep one record no one else knows about. One just for you. He'd insisted on keeping a safety deposit box at the local bank, First Crescent Savings. Riley hadn't thought about it in years. Her father had died 7 years ago, but she remembered helping him once as a teenager, watching as he tucked something into a slim metal box in a private room at the bank. She burst into her mother's room. "Mom. Dad's deposit box. Do you remember where the key is?" Marianne blinked groggily. "In my sewing kit, I think." "Why?" Riley was already running down the stairs. The next morning, they stood at the counter of First Crescent Savings. The branch manager led them to the back, where a small private room held rows of locked boxes. Marianne's hand trembled as she slid the key into place. Inside was a small, black ledger. A flash drive. Several old bank envelopes. The ledger was Riley's father in a nutshell: neat handwriting, dated entries, color-coded tabs. It was a complete personal financial history: deposits, account transfers, home equity statements, retirement balances, many of which predated her mother's marriage to Frank. It even included photocopies of the deed to the house and beneficiary designations on life insurance. But the flash drive was the real treasure. When they returned home, Riley plugged it into her laptop. The folder structure was pristine: spreadsheets going back 15 years, a digital scan of the house title, tax returns, all annotated, all up to date until about a year after her father passed. What floored her, though, was the folder labeled 2021 to 2024 addendum. Her mother had been secretly updating her late husband's system. "Mom. Did you keep this going?" "I tried," Marianne said softly. "I thought it would help keep things in order. And maybe help me feel like he was still with me." Riley clicked through. The records detailed every transfer Frank had made from Marianne's accounts, including timestamps and cross-referenced accounts. Marianne had noted strange behavior. Frank withdrew $3,000. Claimed it was for plumbing but never hired anyone. Or, used my card at the casino. Said it was for client networking. It was the kind of evidence lawyers dreamed of. The next day, they delivered the full contents of the safety deposit box to Lena Wu and Elijah. This is gold," Lena said, flipping through the printed ledger. "And the flash drive makes it even better. Time-stamped, digital files, updated over time. This is indisputable. This ledger shows assets existed before Frank entered the picture. It proves premarital ownership and a pattern of systematic exploitation. He's done." Later that week, Frank returned, bold, smiling, and completely unaware he was walking into the final act. He parked his car arrogantly in the driveway and strutted to the porch like he still owned the place. "Kathy," he called, knocking confidently. "Let's be reasonable." Riley opened the door. "I'm not here to fight," he said, holding out a plastic grocery bag. Inside was a bottle of wine and a small potted plant. "Peace offering." Riley raised an eyebrow. "Where's the stuff you took from the house?" "Come on," he said with a wink. "I needed a place to keep my things. You can't just lock me out of my own house. We're married, remember?" "No, you're not," came Marianne's voice from behind her. Frank turned. "Kathy, baby, don't let her do this to us." Marianne stepped forward and handed him a piece of paper. "A restraining order. You're not welcome here anymore. My lawyer filed for separation yesterday." Frank's jaw tightened. "You think this changes anything? You don't even have proof." "Oh, but we do," Riley said, stepping aside to reveal Elijah, standing in the hallway with a folder full of printed documents. Frank's confidence cracked. "What is this?" "Records. Transactions. Fraudulent credit cards. You were sloppy, Frank. And thanks to Dad, we have everything we need." Frank tried to laugh it off. "You'll never prove it was me." "We don't have to," Marianne said quietly. "We already did." Elijah stepped forward. "You've officially violated a restraining order. You'll be hearing from us again very soon." Frank's mask finally fell. His eyes turned dark. "You think this is over?" Riley didn't flinch. "It is. You just don't know it yet." He left in silence. But as his car disappeared down the street, Riley and her mother stood side by side, unshaken. They had the truth now. And the proof. And soon, everyone else would, too. 2 months after Frank last set foot in the house, the courtroom was silent, except for the scratch of a ballpoint pen as Riley signed her statement. Beside her, Marianne sat with her hands folded, shoulders straight, her face a mixture of exhaustion and quiet resolve. The woman who had once whispered apologies for her husband's behavior now met every lawyer, officer, and judge with a steady gaze. The transformation was slow, but profound. Frank Bennett was finally being arraigned on multiple charges: financial fraud, identity theft, and exploitation of a vulnerable adult. His crimes, once hidden behind charm, excuses, and a carefully curated image, were now laid bare in legal terms and forensic ledgers. Riley's careful documentation, the safety deposit box evidence, the phone logs, and 3 additional complaints from other women who had suffered similar fates under Frank's manipulation, together, it was airtight. Even his supposed business partner, Vincent Cole, had turned against him after investigators followed the money trail into Vincent's own bank statements. It turned out Frank had lied to him, too, promising returns from fake construction projects that never existed. Vincent, facing unrelated charges, gave up information in exchange for a lighter sentence. What he revealed added fuel to the prosecution: false invoices, fake contracts, and a pattern of financial deception stretching back over a decade. Riley's stolen car had been found during a search of a storage unit rented under a fake name. Her laptop was still inside, and while much of the data had been wiped, a backup restoration recovered not just her personal files but email drafts and old correspondence, some of which Frank had tampered with while pretending to help organize household paperwork. It was enough to shut the door on Frank's denials once and for all. The day of his sentencing, the courtroom was packed. 2 of the other women Frank had manipulated sat in the pews behind Riley and her mother. They didn't know each other before the investigation, but now they sat together like battle-scarred sisters, bonded by shared betrayal. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, reviewed the evidence with cool efficiency. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of every wrong Frank had tried to hide. "Mr. Bennett," she said, "your actions represent a calculated pattern of emotional and financial abuse. You preyed upon trust, affection, and vulnerability. You manipulated legal systems, stole identities, and depleted life savings for personal gain." Frank sat in silence at the defendant's table. His once slick hair was now graying and disheveled. His expensive blazer looked a size too big. The confidence he had once worn like armor had been stripped away piece by piece in front of everyone. "I sentence you to 6 years in state prison, with restitution payments to each of your victims," the judge continued. "You are barred from accessing or managing financial accounts of others upon release. Any attempt to contact the victims will result in immediate reincarceration." Frank opened his mouth to protest, but his lawyer touched his shoulder, shaking his head. The gavel fell. Final. Outside the courthouse, Riley exhaled deeply. The sharp edge of adrenaline gave way to a strange quiet in her chest. It wasn't celebration. It was relief. Closure. A door slamming shut behind them. Marianne looked up at the courthouse steps, her hands trembling just slightly. "I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who stood up to someone like him," she said softly. Riley looped her arm through her mother's. "You didn't just stand up. You fought back." They spent the next few weeks sorting through what was left, both physically and emotionally. Frank had taken furniture, electronics, and personal mementos, but his greatest theft had been trust. And yet, as they scrubbed walls, painted cabinets, and sorted boxes of damaged memories, they began to rebuild more than just a house. One afternoon, while cleaning the attic, Riley stumbled on a box she hadn't seen in years: old photo albums, handwritten letters from her father, and a sealed envelope marked for Marianne and Riley, someday. Inside was a letter in her father's blocky handwriting. "If you're reading this, I probably didn't get the chance to tell you everything. But if life ever goes sideways, and let's face it, life has a habit of doing just that, remember this. You're stronger than you think. People will try to take advantage of that kindness you both wear so easily. But there's power in kindness. And there's power in being prepared. Use your minds. Trust each other. And don't let anyone make you feel like less than who you are." Tears streamed down Marianne's cheeks as Riley read it aloud. It was everything they needed to hear. In the following months, Marianne filed for divorce and had the deed to the house legally restored in her name. With Lena Wu's guidance, she also established a trust to protect her finances. Riley helped her transfer her pension into a new account that required both fingerprint and dual authentication access. The past would never be able to sneak back in. The media picked up the story of Frank's sentencing, especially after one of the other women, a retired school teacher, came forward publicly. The local paper ran a feature on financial elder abuse, and Riley was contacted by a nonprofit to help design an educational campaign on spotting signs of exploitation. She agreed. It was cathartic, in a way, turning their pain into purpose. By spring, the house looked entirely different. The new roof was finally installed. Riley refinished the porch swing. Marianne replaced the couch with something cheerful and yellow, and added plants to the kitchen window. Laughter returned. So did Sunday night dinners. The silence that had once filled the home with dread was now a blanket of comfort. One evening, Riley and Marianne sat outside, glasses of wine in hand, as the sun dipped below the hills. "You know," Marianne said, "this place feels lighter somehow." "Because it's ours again," Riley replied. "Really ours." They clinked glasses. "To clean slates," Marianne smiled. "To second chances," Riley said. The cicadas hummed softly in the trees. The wind carried the scent of lavender from the garden. And for the first time in years, they weren't waiting for the other shoe to drop. They were simply living. Freely. Authentically. Together.